A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no code. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is The Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator Adam Keller, and we are broadcasting live, online, and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio Studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, unions are already endorsing Joe Biden. They shouldn't. Alabama is among the top 10 most deadly states for workers. Thousands of children are at work illegally across the South. We hear from our Madison City Council watcher and much more. All that on the program today. If you want to be part of the show, we've got a phone number and the line is open. We've already got the line open, and that line is 844-899-TVLR. That's 844-899-8857. You can call or text during the show, and we might bring you on the air. You can also leave a voicemail or shoot us a text message throughout the week. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us anywhere you find anything online. Just search for the Valley Labor Report. In particular, make sure you bookmark our website, TVLR.fm. We have new content going up there every day, write-ups from our clips, original articles, original reporting, commentary, analysis of, by, and for working people in the South. But we're also on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, all at the Valley Labor Report. Wherever you get your podcasts, the Valley Labor Report. If you want to become a sustaining donor to the program, if you want to make a one-time donation just to kind of give us a tip for a particularly good segment, if you want to buy our shirts or our stickers, you can do all that at our website as well. You can become a donor at tvlr.fm/donate. You can buy our merch at tvlr.fm/store. And you can become a patron at patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report. If you're a member of a union, then you should get your local to sponsor the show. We could not do the show without our union sponsors. They are integral to the functioning of the show. So if you want more details on that, then you can reach out to the show. DM us on any of our media pages or go to tvlr.fm/contact. And send us a message, and we'll get started working with you.
Yeah, absolutely appreciate our sponsors, and I want to add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, or through your favorite podcast app. And we are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check it out.
Absolutely. So first up, before we get into any of our newsy type content, we've got a shout out for there's a local event happening next week that y'all need to hear about that Ben Job is working on. Ben, talk to us about Porch Fest.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me on to talk about it, because it is happening next week. That's the 6th, Saturday, 5 to 9 p.m. over at 5 Points, historic 5 Points in Huntsville, Alabama. An old converted mill neighborhood that's now like the swanky part of town, I guess. Very, very hip place to be. But check it out. It is a free event. It's probably the best spot to see all these local musicians and stuff you might have heard about around town, to see the local flavors coming through. I mean, the big one, Wanda Wesolowski's band will be there. If y'all haven't heard of her, you got to check her out. One of the best singer-songwriters, and people like Ali Free playing amazing music. And man, there's a lot of bands I'm pretty excited about. I'll be running a stage over there the whole time, and you bring lawn chairs. They are closing down the road, thankfully, this year, so it'll be nice and safe. No cars burning up during the sets. But you pretty much go to this one road over in 5 Points. You can walk the road and take your choice. If you want to hear some jazz music, there's going to be Josh Counts and his band, which is probably the top jazz guys in town. There's going to be people doing covers. I think the Brookliners are doing Eyes Around covers if you want to hear some like 90s stuff. There's a band called Free Candy, which is great friends of mine that do kind of jam band stuff. There's Drop Diver, an amazing just like classic rock. It's like real old style rock, and they're younger guys, but they do it up so good. And I mean, there's a lot more.
What about XY Spaces? Is XY Spaces?
I don't think XY is there.
Oh no.
And technically, I think XY is out of Decatur or something. So I don't know if they were double booked or what.
Gotcha.
I would love to see them there. But yeah, I'm trying to think. The Beastie Boys. That's the other one I wanted to mention, which is a Beastie Boys cover band. The Beastie Boys. Yes. Okay. But you got to see them.
Isn't that like a Jewish slur for white people?
I think it's for non-Jewish people, but it's they put on a great show. Like you got to see that. So yeah, and there's food trucks, like I said, all free, very family and dog friendly as long as they're chill. Keep them on a leash.
Right.
But I'm very excited that they're kind of endorsing it officially, closing the road and letting people at 5 Points really have a blast because it's gonna be a good time. So.
Awesome. BYOB. Or they're food trucks. There's going to be food trucks there, aren't there?
There is food trucks, and you can bring coolers if you want to like stash something in the cooler. I believe that's very accepted and encouraged. And usually there's some art vendors and musicians will sell some stuff there too. So yeah, check it out and support the scene. It's totally free, so like you can't get better than that,
Yeah, awesome. Well, and it's from when? 5 to 9?
5 to 9 next Saturday over at 5 Points. If you get on University Drive or Pratt Avenue and go east, you're gonna hit Porch Fest. So that's all you need to do. Check it out.
Right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Definitely. Thanks for having me on.
All right, folks. So let's get into this. Workers' Memorial Day was yesterday, April 28th. That is the day that the labor movement observes. Observes Workers' Memorial Day. It's when we remember workers that are killed, injured, or made ill on the job. And it's a day to renew our commitment to fight for strong safety and health protections. It is set on the anniversary of the initiation of the Occupational Safety and Health Act. Which was more than 50 years ago. More than 50 years ago on April 28th, OSHA went into effect. And, it's important to remember that law was won because of tireless efforts of the labor movement, organizing for safer working conditions and stuff like that. After more than 50 years of OSHA, over 668,000 workers can say that their lives have been saved by its passage. And that's according to the AFL-CIO, right, Adam?
Right.
But the work is not done. Each year, thousands of workers are still killed. Millions are injured. 100,000 workers every year die because of occupational illnesses. So it's, there's still definitely a lot to do. The AFL-CIO puts out an annual death on the job report that we're going to be digging into here in a little bit. But one of the things that they mentioned here in this is that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, as well as the Mine Safety and Health Administration, really, they just lack the resources that they need to protect workers. Many employers and workers never even see OSHA in their workplaces. And the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, reports they show that a majority of employers fail to report workplace injuries due to OSHA's limited procedures and penalties that are still too low to be a deterrent. So corporations exploit those weaknesses and create environments where workers are not adequately protected when they speak out against unsafe working conditions. Black, Latino, and immigrant workers are disproportionately killed on the job, and workers still cannot freely join a union without retaliation from their employers.
Absolutely.
But, there's some hope. There is some hope, right, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, through the labor movement, that's how working people have won safety and health protections, from the shop floor all the way to the halls of Congress. You name it, any safety feature in your workplace probably came from the struggle of workers before you. I was speaking to some high school students yesterday on Workers' Memorial Day about this very subject and talked to them about, hey, do you like fire exits? Are fire alarms pretty handy in your life? I would say yes. And the reason we have that is thanks to the fights of the labor movement. And, whether that's historically or today, unions are still today fighting for safe jobs for everyone, regardless of their race or gender or employment or background. Winning strong standards from governments and employers raises the standard of practice for all of us. And educating working people on their rights keeps our most vulnerable from being silenced. The labor movement is a community that comes together to ensure everyone goes home at the end of a work shift alive and without the chronic illnesses caused by work exposures that continue to plague many workers. And, I know we're going to get into this a little bit more on the report, the Death on the Job report, but I mean, over 300 Americans die on the job every day now. I mean, and that's not ancient history. And that's in the United States of America. And, we just had an anniversary of that massive garment worker disaster in Bangladesh 10 years ago. It was just an anniversary there. And so it's just a reminder of how dangerous it is for so many of us to go to work. We risk our lives and our limbs and our health and safety. And our government has not taken adequate steps to protect us from exploitative corporations and employers. Because at the end of the day, their goal is to make as much profit as possible. And sometimes our own health and safety gets in the way of that pursuit of profit. And it's up to us to organize, to be strong enough to ensure that we can have safe workplaces and we can ensure the government upholds its promise that it was made, this promise was made to us with OSHA, that we would have safe workplaces. So, together on Workers' Memorial Day is a good time to raise our voices and to speak out for stronger safety and health protections in our workplaces and have stronger job safety and health laws. We have to hold employers accountable to keep workers safe. We demand action on critical safety and health protections against preventable workplace hazards such as heat illness, workplace violence, infectious diseases, silica in mining, and toxic chemical exposures. We demand more resources from Congress for our nation's job safety agencies to hold employers accountable. And above all, we demand dignity at work. We will organize and fight for the fundamental right of every worker to a safe job until that promise is fulfilled. Let us remember the dead and fight for the living.
And so let's talk about some of these numbers that the AFL put out, because they are really, really staggering. And these are coming from the annual Death on the Job report from the AFL-CIO, the America's largest labor federation. It's the 32nd one of these reports that they put out annually. And one of the key findings here this year is that Black workers and Latino workers are dying on the job more than they have in 10 years. Wow. The highest death rate. I mean, workplaces in America are becoming less safe. In a time where workers where employers, where bosses are bragging about record profits. Here's from the AFL's press release. The report shows the fatality rate for black workers grew from 3.5 to 4 workers per 100,000, and more than 650 died on the job. That's just black workers in just 1 year, the highest number in nearly 2 decades. Latino workers have the greatest risk of dying on the job, with a fatality rate of 4.5 per 100,000 that has grown 13% over the past decade. There was also a slight uptick in deaths for Latino workers in 2021, and the overwhelming majority who died were immigrants. And Liz Schuler mentions that, the report, it's not just about data points, because behind each one of these deaths, each one of these thousands, tens of thousands of deaths, is a person. Every worker who died, says Liz Schuler, every worker who died on the job represents another empty seat at a family's kitchen table. Every worker accounted for in this report is a person who just went to work one day and never came home. And that's really important to recognize. And there has been studies showing this, that when you talk about, once these numbers get so abstract, they become less meaningful to people. And so it's important to not let yourself kind of fall into that trap of thinking about these as statistics as opposed to stories and people. But some of these top line numbers in 2021, 343 workers every day died from hazardous working conditions. About 5,200 workers over the year were killed on the job in the United States. An estimated 120,000 died from occupational diseases. In 1 year, 120,000. The job fatality rate increased to 3.6 per 100,000 workers. Employers reported, and remember, I just told you that the majority of employers do not report work-related injuries and illnesses, and we're going to get to some Alabama-specific data here in a bit. Employers reported 3.2 million work-related injuries and illnesses. The true impact of COVID-19 infections due to workplace exposures is unknown. Limited data show that more than 1.5 million nursing home workers have been infected with COVID-19, and more than 3,000 have died. That's just the nursing home workers, right? Fewer data are now reported on job injuries and illnesses related to workplace violence, musculoskeletal disorders, and heat illnesses, which continue to be major problems, and underreporting is widespread. The true toll of work-related injuries and illnesses is 5.4 million to 8.1 million each year just in the private industry. Not even in the public sector, which accounts for how much of, how many workers are public sector workers? Like 1 in 10? 1 in 5? It's a lot. It's a lot of workers, hundreds of thousands, over 1 million. The report also lays out recommendations for strengthening federal agencies tasked with enforcing worker safety. In 2021, there are 1,800 inspectors, 1,871, 900 at the federal level and 971 at the state level. But in Alabama, there are zero inspectors in the state of Alabama tasked with enforcing worker safety. Zero. 900 inspectors at the federal level, 971 at the state level, for more than 10.8 million workplaces under the Occupational Safety and Health Act's jurisdiction. That equates to the federal Occupational and Safety and Health Administration having the ability to inspect every workplace, get this, once every 190 years.
Wow.
Once every 2 centuries is the capacity with which our government has to inspect workplaces. Once every 2 centuries. Just $3.99 in OSHA's budget to protect each worker. Less than $4 per worker is how much is allocated to protect our safety and our health. Penalties for employer violations remain too low to be a deterrent, and fewer than 130 worker deaths have been criminally prosecuted. Get this, not just in the last year. I told you that there were 5,000 workers died last year from a work-related accident. 120,000 last year died due to workplace-related illnesses. So having those numbers in your head, I'll give you 2 or 3 seconds. Guess how many how many worker deaths have been criminally prosecuted since 1970. With those numbers in your head, 5,000 workers died on the job last year. 120,000 died from workplace-related illnesses. 130 worker deaths have been criminally prosecuted since 1970. 130 over 50 years. That is less than 2 per year. 2 criminal prosecutions every year. When we have tens of thousands of workers dying because of their boss's neglect. AFL Safety and Health Director Rebecca Reindl says that the federal agencies responsible for safeguarding workers were created for a reason, and it's past time that they receive the funding and staffing they need to create and enforce worker protection standards. Employers should be held accountable for the working conditions on job sites, and our lawmakers at every level must use their power to properly enforce the policies designed to protect us. Some more numbers nationwide. The industries with the highest fatality rates in 2021 were, first, the most deadly occupation in the country was agriculture, forestry, fishing, and hunting, with a fatality rate of 19.5 per 100,000 workers. That is 4 times, more than 4 times the national average. Transportation and warehousing, 14.5 per 100,000, more than 3 times the national average. Mining, quarrying, and oil and gas extraction, 14.2 per 100,000. Construction, 9.4 per 100,000. And wholesale trade, 5.1 per 100,000. It's worth noting that law enforcement is not in the top 5 most dangerous professions.
You know, I did notice that.
Yeah. Just worth a note.
Do we need a thin green line to
I mean,
protect our,
honestly,
to honor the folks in agriculture, forestry, and fishing and hunting? I mean, it's a much more deadly occupation.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Miners, transportation workers, drivers, they don't get any kind of special hubbub whenever they die. So let's talk about Alabama. I already said in Alabama we have 0 people. None. Nobody in the state of Alabama who cares, ostensibly, about law and order. Nobody tasked with enforcing workplace safety and health standards. Nobody. There are 27 federal inspectors assigned to Alabama, which gives those federal inspectors the ability to inspect every workplace in Alabama once every 150 years, once every century and a half. In Alabama last year, 111 workers died because of workplace injuries. 32,600 workers died of workplace-related illnesses. We are among the top 10 most deadly states for workers. The number 1 state being the safest, the number 50 state being the least safe. We are number 43. We had the 7th highest death rate for workers in the state of Alabama. However, and this may be related to some of the numbers that I mentioned earlier, like how we have 0 people tasked with enforcing safety and health standards in this state. We have a higher than average fatality rate. I just told you, it's among the top 10 most deadly states in the country to be if you're a worker. If you're a working person, Alabama is one of the top 10 most deadly states. However, our illness and injury reporting, the number of illnesses and injuries reported by employers in the state of Alabama is lower than the national average.
The math isn't really adding up there.
Yeah, the math is not mathin' there. The math is not mathin' there. Really, really gross stuff.
I guess, should we be surprised to see Alabama rank in the bottom 10 yet again when it comes to our quality of life?
Yeah.
We have seen throughout the history of the state of Alabama that our state government does not care about working class people. It has made it a priority to support employers and at the expense of employees. That's why we have 0 federal inspectors. We have legislators who are now poring over pre-K textbooks to see if anything is too quote-unquote woke.
Right.
Yet we have 0 people who work for state government in this state who are supposed to look at safety and health of working people, which is the vast majority of Alabamians, right? The vast majority of Alabamians are working class. We don't own anything. Maybe we own a car, perhaps, at most, but most of us don't own anything. We don't live off profits. We don't live off rents. We don't live off dividends. We don't live off interest. We live off our wages. And yet our state government cares so little that this is the result.
Yeah, 0 work inspectors, but we have a lot of woke inspectors. Right?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, so really great use of resources of state funds. One more story on the theme of Workers' Memorial Day. Last week, the National Council for Occupational Safety and Health, National COSH, announced the council's annual list of 12 employers whose unsafe practices put the health and lives of workers as well as the safety of communities at risk, known as the Dirty Dozen. Railroad Workers United submitted a nomination for the Class 1 railroads, the Class 1 railroad employers, for their lack of safety, their lack of support for their workers when it comes to safety and health. And the National COSH agreed. The National COSH placed the big Class 1 railroads among them after being nominated for the distinction by Railroad Workers United in February. In a statement from Railroad Workers United, the General Secretary, Jason Doring, says rail workers have for years been blowing the whistle on unsafe practices of Class 1 railroads. These employers have pushed for single-person crews, implemented precision scheduled railroading, where cost-cutting measures have resulted in longer, heavier trains with fewer workers, while cutting back on both inspections and maintenance, put in place disciplinary policies forcing sick workers into work, failed to offer paid sick time, and continued their long-standing practice of retaliating against rail workers who report safety hazards and job-related injuries. And they also mentioned that the East Palestine disaster really kind of brought folks' attention to what railroad workers have been warning about for years, for decades. From that report, the National COSH mentioned a witness from a railroad worker, the last name of Cox, saying that precision scheduled railroading has cut the workforce to the bare minimum. I have witnessed railroads, according to this worker, demanding 1 minute per car safety inspections. 1 minute per car, 60 seconds. They also say that over 6 years, the Class 1 freight rails have reduced staff by 30%. by 30%, eliminating 45,000 jobs. Norfolk Southern's train accident rate, meanwhile, measured by the Federal Railway Administration, increased by 25% just between 2019 and 2022. They're cutting staff, accidents are increasing, and meanwhile, the company is posting record profits just in 2022, and just in profits, not in operating revenue. I'm talking about profits. They got $4.8 billion with a B in profits. Aaron Hiles, a locomotive engineer at BNSF, wasn't feeling well but postponed a doctor's appointment because he was called to work on short notice and didn't want to be penalized under the company's strict attendance policy. A few weeks later, on June 16th, 2022, he died of a heart attack in the engine room of a freight train. In December of 2022, tens of thousands of rail workers were ready to go on strike to win paid sick leave among some of these other fights, but were denied the right to take job action by President Biden and Congress under the terms of the Railway Labor Act. And so those are just some of the reasons for why the National Kosh agreed that they deserved, that the big Class 1 railroads deserved the indistinction of being among the Dirty Dozen worst employers for occupational safety and health last year. Really pretty gross stuff. And so with that, we're going to go ahead and head to a break. We'll be right back with our Madison City Council watcher, Tryston Gilbert, talking about the last month in Madison City. If you want to get in on the conversation, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker, and Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136 out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
The sign hit the city like a bolt of lightning.
You know the photo. It's iconic. Marches in the streets holding a simple sign with a simple message.
I am a man.
The I Am Story podcast explores the fight that inspired those words, how a group of sanitation workers in Memphis stood up and made history.
They don't see us as men and women.
Go to iamstory.com or wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe.
I'm attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law.
You need attorneys always available to take care of you.
Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law.
And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case.
Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and this is the Valley Labor Report, folks. My name is Jacob Morrison, my co-host is Adam Keller. We've got a phone number and the line is open, 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can call or text, and we might respond on the air or bring you on if you call in. Got a text from longtime viewer Infinite Content about the Teamsters and Amazon. We're going to be talking about that in overtime, but the brief summary is that some Amazon drivers unionized with the Teamsters. They were voluntarily recognized by their employer, a contractor of Amazon, and they have a tentative agreement already, which is wild stuff.
Really cool.
Yeah, really cool. We're going to be talking about some of that stuff. Some of the maybe complexities there in overtime. Little Jimmy going to be responding to your comment here in just a bit when we get to this Biden story. But right now we're going to talk about Madison City. Madison City is Huntsville's little brother. Huntsville's little brother, right to the west of us, surrounded on all sides actually by Huntsville, I think. But another fun fact, it is the actual official home of the Rocket City Trash Pandas, the newly unionized minor league baseball team here in the area. And we have a friend of the show, Tryston Gilbert, watches all of the Madison City Council meetings, so you don't have to, so I don't have to. And so he comes on once a month to give us the lowdown on what's happening over there. Tryston, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Morning, Jacob. Can you hear me?
I can. You sound great.
Excellent. Glad to be on.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Yeah, so talk to us. What's been going on during the month of April over in Madison City?
So month after month, it's a lot of the same stuff. I'll start with the most controversial thing because that's what gets everybody's blood pumping. The city council voted to move the bulk of public comments to the end of the meetings. So it's the last thing on the agenda instead of one of the first. They do still take comments that are specifically for agenda items near the beginning. But for that, you have to go up. You have to say which agenda item you're commenting on, and then you've got your regular 3 minutes. And the president will cut you off. That's President Bartlett. If you stray off topic, then even if you spoke up top, you'll be able to come back. So you could talk for 6 minutes if you want. But there is a concern there that they're doing this right now in like coming into May when this special election for the potential government transition is. The justification is that they have all these department heads who give reports towards the end, and that they're they have early days. They start at like 5 a.m. or something, and then they had to sit through the meetings, which are made longer by further public comments. But then there's the question of whether or not they should need to hear all that stuff. And one of the council members, Karen Denzine of, I think, District 7, she had quite the case as to why she would not vote to move the comments.
Yeah, and we've pulled that, Tryston. So let's go ahead and Adam play this clip from the Madison City Council meeting.
Okay, I have comments. I believe listening to the citizens is the first order of business, not the last. I do not support suddenly changing the public comments to the end, especially if we're doing it for a trial period in April and May when we have this very important election coming up. And so we're looking at changing our government. So to have people be able to come, I applaud the citizens that have been engaged in the process, have taken the time to come to the city council and to make their voices heard. I've always championed the voice of the citizen. And as such, I do not see a compelling reason to change the Madison way that we've always done it. I don't believe we have to do like Huntsville or anyone else. We're Madison. We've always done it this way. We've always put the citizen's voice first. And I do appreciate our department heads and that the fact that they have to sit through this. But this has really been an unusual circumstance. It's not all the time that our comments go hours or whatever. They are usually very brief. I can remember years where it was just Bibi that got up and spoke at a city council meeting. This is an unusual thing, so I hate to look at it changing a whole way we do things because we're in an unusual circumstance. This is only through May. But I do appreciate that they have to wait. But I also think it's good for the department heads to hear what the people have to say. I believe that's important too. And respect really is a two-way street. I believe keeping the public comments at the beginning of the meeting shows respect for the citizen's voice, just as respectfully addressing the city council shows deference for fellow citizens. So I'll be voting no.
And that's a pretty compelling case, I think, to vote no, because, we've been talking, we've just been doing this Madison City Council Watch segment since the council manager proposal has been put up, since that has been kind of an issue in Madison. And there's been a lot of controversy around that. I think some warranted, some not. I think probably if I lived in Madison, I would probably vote no. I would probably vote no. That would be my inclination. Some of that is some of the reasons in the vote no campaign are they seem reasonable, and some seem maybe a little bit less reasonable. But and so the public comments have been going a really long time, right? But that's not super common, and so it is kind of weird to change the entire way that the city council meetings are operated because of one controversial period in the council.
Yeah, it feels pretty heavy-handed and self-serving. I will mention, so far, this is only a temporary measure. It'll be in place through May, and then they'll vote whether to switch back to how it was. But again, May is when all of this is happening, so it's a little tightly wound right now. And Karen Denzine was the only one to vote no on that measure. Everybody else voted yes, so it's in place. The second meeting went that way. It went fine, I guess, fine in asterisks there. Like everybody mostly stuck to the agenda, figured out the new rules, and still had people talking at the end. But you heard her case. I think I agree with her. She made a good argument. Yeah. Next bit of interesting, hopefully a little bit more low impact. The council was asking that people stop cleaning gravestones with bleach as it deteriorates them over time, which can kind of ruin the historical record in a way. So if you have any loved ones interred in Madison graveyards, before using bleach to clean the gravestones, give your city council person a call. They're putting up an online resource so people know which solvent to use, I believe.
Okay.
So that's my up top news. A little more at the end. I want to talk for a brief bit about just a trend I've been seeing and where I kind of think the city is going. This is not related to the city manager issue at all, but week after week, people are in there. People come and complain about traffic. If you've ever driven through Madison at rush hour, you know the traffic's pretty bad. But you've also got people complaining about the way Madison has drifted away from its sort of small town roots. And they mentioned things like not just traffic, but like how it used to not have multi-level dwellings. And I kind of think that the multi-level dwellings thing is a way to talk around both the issue of like having higher density in a city and having like higher diversity, because higher density tends to be a little cheaper, brings in more marginalized people. And I've been learning a lot about urbanism lately. I've got only 2 minutes to talk about it, so I'll keep it kind of brief. But like Madison's experiencing an unprecedented amount of growth in the last 5 to 10 years. And I think if they're going to, I think that there's a lot of yearning for a time when it was smaller, and a lot of people are wanting to cling to that small town. Everybody has a house with a big yard feel, and you can drive around it easily. But I don't see a way to go back to that.
Right.
And I feel like the way to embrace that growth is to like densify, put in public transportation, and have like walkable areas with commercial areas that you don't have to drive to. But I just really doubt the political will is there to shift mindsets and go that way. So I think it's just going to get worse. It's going to become a suburban hell, kind of already is.
Yeah. That would be kind of my guess. And you know, and you know, look, I don't know. I've never lived in a place with public transportation, but I have worked in places with public transportation. I've worked in I've taken work trips to DC a few times, and it does feel really, there is a certain amount of freedom of like not being shackled to your car everywhere you go, right? There's definitely a certain amount of freedom that I felt, that I enjoyed, being able to walk everywhere I needed to go, or take a train that was, relatively inexpensive. It was really nice. Whereas living here, you have to have a car. You got to have a car anywhere you go. And it's just, I don't know. It is not, it's a lot.
And even in places with really thoroughly developed public transportation like Amsterdam, it's better for people who are driving in cars too. So if you really love your car and you're not just taking it because it's the most convenient option or the only option like it is around here, you'd still be better off there, because you'd be getting all the people who would rather not off the road. You wouldn't have to share it with them.
Right.
So in my last little bit here, a little bit more news. Just a reminder, the special election for how Madison's government is going to look is going to take place on May 9th. Be ready for it. Read up. If you want to know more about that, I Vote Madison is hosting a citizens debate on May 3rd. That'll be from 5:30 to 7 in Auditorium 1 of the Madison Public Library. It's a Braver Angels style debate. Sorry there. You can read more about that on their website. That's ivotemadison.com/citizen debate. And as far as I can tell, Braver Angels style means they sort of balance the groups of pro and con, for and against for a given issue. They pre-register candidates. They have a couple of professional, well-informed people up front, and then other citizens who've pre-registered can join in on the debate as well. So again, ivotemadison.com/citizen debate for more info on that. Go get your learning in. Thanks, guys.
All right. Thanks, Tryston. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks again, man.
Talk to you next month.
See ya.
All right. And so with that, we're gonna get to the thing that I highlighted at the top, which is And, you know, it's a bit more political for us, but this is definitely in the news. And unions have been jumping in on it. And that is that President Joe Biden has announced that he is running for re-election. It was on Monday or Tuesday. He came out with his ad. And, you know, like a lot of these ads, there was a lot of platitudes, didn't really mean a whole lot. And, you know, I don't know. A lot of people, I think, kind of expected it. There was some talk at the beginning of his term about like figuring that he was going to be a one-term president, that he was going to intentionally, you know, I'm just going to step back and I'm not going to run for re-election. But no, he is running for re-election at 81 years old. Really kind of wild stuff. But, you know, on the other hand, who on the Democratic side would run if not for Joe Biden, which is kind of pretty sad. You know, I think it's obvious that Kamala Harris would do worse. Pete Buttigieg would do worse. There is Gavin Newsom and J.B. Pritzker, and we were talking about Jay Inslee. He's been up in Washington, has been kind of interesting. So I don't know, maybe they could build a campaign if Biden wasn't running, but obviously they're not going to because Biden is running. And Biden announced, and already within this first week, he has had several major union endorsements. He's had the SEIU, which represents almost 1 million workers, IATSE, representing hundreds of thousands of workers, the Amalgamated Transit Union, the Iron Workers Union, the Electrical Workers Union, the National Education Association, American Federation of Teachers, you know, lots and lots of unions coming out and already endorsing him within a week of his announcement. And I just have an issue with that. In all of their statements about this, every one of them just about mentioned that he's either the most pro-union president in history or the most pro-union since FDR. I think the first one is flatly untrue. I think FDR was certainly more pro-union than Joe Biden. The second one might be true, maybe. Probably.
Yeah, I mean,
because you got to think about that. If Joe Biden's not the most pro-union president since FDR, then who would be? Who would be the most pro-union
you
president?
You could maybe make an argument for Truman or Eisenhower or Kennedy as being, more pro, or Johnson even, being more pro-labor. I mean, I'll give him credit. He's more pro-labor than Obama and Clinton.
Yes.
And that would be, of course, the standard comparisons there.
Right. And so, maybe that is, maybe that's some of the...
And we're talking degrees of difference here, like...
Right.
We're not talking drastic degrees.
Leaps and bounds.
Right, yeah. I mean, frankly, more marginal than significant, in my personal opinion.
The Amalgamated Transit Union had a graphic that says, "We're riding with Biden." And they said in their statement, one thing is crystal clear throughout our nation's politically divisive times. Joe has consistently stood for workers, public transit, and working families every step of the way. Public transit? I mean, what are they even talking about there? I don't even know what that is a reference to. IATSE mentioned, and look, each one of these unions, there are some things that each one point to that are real measurable material benefits to their members that has happened under the Biden administration with greater or lesser involvement from the president himself. IATSE mentioned the American Rescue Plan Act, which provided IATSE members relief during the COVID times when, obviously IATSE theatrical and stage employees, for about 2 years.
Wasn't a lot of live entertainment happening.
Wasn't a lot of live entertainment. And so that unemployment stimulus was really important to keeping those folks keeping those folks their heads above water while the industry recovered. And so, that's real. That's real. That's not nothing, right? And it's not even, when I say it's not nothing, I don't even mean that to discount it. Like, that's a lot. The unemployment stimulus was really a huge thing for keeping the economy afloat and for keeping people afloat as they were waiting for their jobs to reopen. And as now most people are back in their jobs. And for the last year or year and a half, that unemployment stimulus, or even 2 years in Alabama, has been expired, even though people still like to pretend. And it's super weird that this talking point is still around about how the government is giving too much people money, and that's why nobody wants to work anymore, even though we have a higher workforce participation rate than we have in decades. We have the lowest unemployment rate that we have than we have in decades, and there's no more unemployment stimulus. Wild talking point, but it was very important while it lasted. The iron workers in their statement mentioned that, they mentioned the bipartisan infrastructure law, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS and Science Act, which we've talked about the CHIPS Act just a couple weeks ago, and how that has really been a giveaway to major corporations without important strings attached for workers and for labor and for unions. And the IBEW in particular, they represent rail workers. And the IBEW actually came out the day and endorsed Joe Biden. And, it seems really inappropriate at this stage in the game to endorse Joe Biden so quickly. Because, and David Griscom was mentioning this on Left Reckoning when he was talking about this in relation to Bernie endorsing Joe Biden, because Bernie endorsed Joe Biden on the same day, I think. And the message that sends with Bernie and with labor is not that Joe Biden is the least bad option. We are a distinct movement with distinct imperatives, things that we're fighting for, and among the people that there are, Joe Biden will be the best enemy to face. Right? That could be an accurate, if an endorsement said that this week, then I would be interested in reading that, and I would not take such an issue with it. But all of these endorsements are just gushing about how great Biden is. And there's just no reason to do that. There's no reason to do that at all. You can say that you're going to vote for Biden, that members should vote for Biden, and but recognize the limitations. And what an endorsement now sends is that we're part of the same movement. Joe Biden and labor are in lockstep. And that's just simply not the case.
No, it's not.
It's simply not the case.
It's not. And, it does bother me as well. And I'm willing to admit reality, right? I'm willing to acknowledge that more than likely the 2024 presidential election will be between Joe Biden and someone else who is worse. I'm willing to accept that is almost certainly the likelihood. And therefore, it's not unreasonable to expect that unions would endorse Joe Biden given those circumstances. But I agree with you about the gushing nature of these press releases and these endorsements, because if anything, it should be the opposite. The Democrats should be gushing about labor and begging us for their votes and for resources, for our volunteer time, for our contributions, for our votes. That's the way it should be. They should be begging us, not the other way around.
Right. Yeah. And the State Employees Association of New Hampshire mentions that, they declined to endorse Joe Biden at this time. And they strike a really good balance in this declaration that they have for him. They say, after careful consideration and in stark contrast to the State Employees Association Affiliate Service Employees International Union, SEIU, we want to make it clear that we are not endorsing Joe Biden for re-election in the upcoming presidential race at this time. Following a robust analysis of the current political landscape, we have come to the conclusion that our members and the New Hampshire voters deserve a competitive Democratic primary. While we respect President Biden's decades of experience in public service and his commitment to public policy, we believe that his record and actions during his first term as president do not merit an automatic re-endorsement. We eagerly await his return to the Granite State to continue the conversation about his labor priorities, and our door is always open to President Biden. We wholeheartedly believe that it is important for our country to have a leader who is fully committed to labor. We need a president who will champion a significantly higher minimum wage, the PRO Act, rail workers' right to strike, Starbucks workers' right to organize, and truly all working people's rights to a living wage. The New Hampshire Union acknowledged that its reluctance may not be shared by its members and supporters, but they say, we hope that they will understand that we are acting in the best interests of our union, our community, and our country. We will continue to monitor the political landscape and engage in discussions with other candidates who share our values and vision for the future. We encourage all our members to exercise their right to vote and to support candidates who reflect their values and beliefs. This is a good statement. This is not, and it's not a statement that's coming out with, barn burners about how terrible Biden is. And it's even, recognizing that there are some positives. And there are, right? But the statement there, the statement that is the most important, his record and actions do not merit an automatic re-endorsement. And that is a fact. That is just a fact. They don't. They do not merit an automatic re-endorsement, and we should not be giving it to them as labor. And so because of the things like denying rail workers the right to strike, that's a huge thing. And the idea that, it's just, and David also mentioned in the chat, David Story, friend of the show, co-founder, he mentioned that one of the things that it does is it also serves to hamper potential competition. And that's absolutely right. The more people come out and endorse Biden, the less likely it will be for another Democratic candidate to jump in, the less easy it will be for other candidates to gain traction. And which is not even to say that I would anticipate other candidates jumping in the absence of union endorsements. It just does not look good.
Right.
And it also
forecloses opportunities and potential. And, we don't know yet if there is going to be a candidate who is authentically more pro-labor. That is possible. Again, realistically, he's an incumbent president. I don't expect a significant challenge necessarily, and I don't necessarily expect him to lose. But also, we are in unprecedented times politically, right?
Right.
Who expected someone to lose an election and try to stay in office?
Right.
There's just a lot happening here, and I just don't like the automatic nature of this. I don't like the fact that members are not being asked.
Exactly.
Because my union and my wife's union, which is two different unions, they have both endorsed, and neither one of us had our opinion asked about it. And, I'm willing to respect the majority of our membership, and if the majority of the membership wants to do this, then so be it. I will, abide by the will of the majority because I believe in that, even if I wouldn't vote to do that. But that's the thing. We should have some input. And as I was talking to you earlier off the air, it only adds fuel to the fire of anti-union critiques, right? Because the right wing in this country wants you to believe that unions are just in the pockets of Democrats, that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Nancy Pelosi are the same people as Randy Weingarten and Lily Garcia and, Sean O'Brien, and they're all the same in the same club. And I would say that that's not accurate, but when union leaders in D.C., make these gushing endorsements without the least bit of member engagement or input, that gives them an argument, right? And I know it's not an accurate reflection of like where the union's resources are spent, or how, unions do their work day in, day out, but it certainly gives credence to some of those right-wing anti-union critiques. Right. And, I think it's a mistake for labor officials, labor leaders, to act as if they are in the pockets of mainstream establishment Democrats. Because mainstream establishment Democrats have abandoned labor for the past 50 years. Right. That's not, and I don't think that's a radical opinion to say that. That's just an observation. Right. I just find it objectionable to do it in this way, and I think we could do better in terms of the process. I certainly think we could do better in terms of a candidate. Realistically, maybe not. Maybe the end results are all the same, right? Maybe you poll the membership and you take your time and you let the primary play out, and at the end of the day, you still endorse Joe Biden and do the same thing you were going to do. Okay, fair enough. But I get the same heartburn that you do, and I understand this is a controversial topic. I understand, even some of our sponsors may not even appreciate this conversation. But we have to have real, authentic conversations about this stuff, because it does matter. Because when you go out and you talk to the general public about unions and why they're good and why you should join them and why we should support them, one of the first things that's going to come up is, oh, that's just Democrat stuff.
Right.
Oh, that's just Joe Biden and them.
Right.
And this doesn't help.
Right.
Let me tell you.
And like I mentioned earlier, even though, this does send a signal, that signal is not accurate. The super majority of union spending comes from local unions, and local unions do not spend a lot of money thinking about who are we going to endorse. They don't spend a lot of resources or time sending people out to knock doors. That's just not what local unions do, right? But local unions spend way more money than international unions do. And so, the accurate assessment of the labor movement is actually that, limitations and all, the majority of the time and resources, the super majority of the time and resources that are spent by unions go to representing members, go to fighting for higher wages, go to saving workers from unfair treatment on the job and safer working conditions. And all of that is true. But this kind of stuff, when the most visible parts of our unions are coming out swinging for somebody that has just, as a fact of the matter, not had our back every step of the way, is bad. And also, it's not even great. It's not even the most effective thing for Biden. I mean, even thinking if I were to be thinking as a Biden political operative, what is the more convincing thing that I could tout on the campaign trail? What would be the more valuable thing to have as a resource on the campaign trail? Is it more valuable to have a statement from an international union that is created by half a dozen people in D.C. that none of the members are consulted on, or immediately after I announce my campaign, that no members are asked about? Is that the most valuable thing? Or would it be more valuable if after the primary season is over, the unions poll their membership, have a referendum of some kind, and then by virtue of the will of their members, the union is able to say, our members voted, and a majority of our members think that our union should endorse Joe Biden for president of the United States. And so by virtue of the will of our members, we are dedicating this many resources and this many boots on the ground to make sure that that happens. And this is why. Which would be more valuable? Obviously, I think the second would be more valuable. But instead, what's happening is the first. What's happening is, just as a fact of the matter, And look, I'm happy to talk to any of these people in DC, and I'm sure most of these people in DC have their heads screwed on right and their hearts in the right place. But as a fact of the matter, all of these statements were crafted by maybe half a dozen people in DC, and the members were not consulted. And so it's not an effective endorsement. It's just not. It's just not. And so we shouldn't be doing ineffective endorsements. We shouldn't be doing ineffective endorsements. Our members should be involved when we endorse political candidates, especially at the national level where everybody has an opinion on it. I think maybe it's one thing if you're endorsing a local union is endorsing people on the local level without input from the membership, because I think, a lot of the membership just isn't. And so, there's a place for like political education there. But on the national level where people have an opinion about this kind of stuff, you really just can't be going and doing stuff like this without members' voice. And it's not even like most of the members are going to disagree ultimately with a Joe Biden endorsement, right? Because union members vote for Democrats like 60-40. So if you polled the members, in all likelihood, you're going to be able to get a Joe Biden endorsement. And so why not just do that? Why not just do that? I can't fathom it. And so it's just very frustrating as a member of the labor movement, as a member of the, fortunately my union hasn't done this yet. And the last time that we endorsed, we did actually have a referendum. We did have a referendum, and the results of the referendum were abided by, and AFGE endorsed the candidate that the members voted for. And we only endorsed after the primary. We ended up endorsing Joe Biden, but it was because the members voted to. So hopefully that's the process that we follow this year. I don't know if it's in the Constitution or not, but yeah, it's just, it's bad. It's not good as a matter of democracy, as a principled unionist and supporter of democracy. We should not be doing this kind of stuff. And then cynically, as like a political operative, it's not even the most effective way to do this kind of thing.
Yeah, and as we kind of close up, I just wanted to, something that David said, and David Story said in the chat that is very true, is just like, realistically, what is the alternative? And that's what I was saying, that, as much as I'd like the process to look differently and feel differently, I recognize that the end result was probably going to be this regardless, right? Even if they had taken their time and polled the membership. And I think that speaks to a much deeper issue we have. If that really is the best we can do, is a Joe Biden versus a Ron DeSantis or a Donald Trump, it is a sad reflection of the situation here in the United States.
Right.
And, my hope is that we have a robust enough working class movement in this country to exert our own demands upon politicians of all stripes, and build consensus around a true pro-worker agenda in this country, which hasn't been happening.
Right. Yeah. And, like I said, it's not that I would be ultimately against a Joe Biden endorsement in the general election. I think that probably for a lot of unions, maybe even for most unions, that would make sense. I think also not endorsing makes sense at all.
Right. I do too. And I think, frankly, like me personally, like I said at the beginning, I think the Democrats should be asking us for votes.
Right.
That's the way that ought to work. Not our union leaders asking us for votes for Democrats.
Right.
And I just, I am uncomfortable with that. I don't care for it. It's not going to change how I act. I didn't vote for Joe Biden and do not plan on voting for Joe Biden because he doesn't need my vote in the state of Alabama. Frankly, it won't make a damn bit of difference. So won't get my vote, won't get my money. But yeah, I would respectfully suggest to our union leaders in D.C. That there's a lot we could do with our resources that goes beyond issuing gushing endorsements of Joe Biden the day he announces.
Yep.
And, to the extent that we have to be engaged in electoral politics, there are alternatives to what we've been doing. Because what we have been doing really hasn't been paying dividends by any objective measurement.
Yep. All right, folks. Well, so that's our thoughts on unions endorsing Biden. And the summary is not good. Not good, folks. So with that, we're going to go ahead and take a break. We're going to be right back to wrap up the first half of the show. If you want to call in, the phone number is 844-899-8857, 844-899-TVLR. We will be right back.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBW558.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at iamaw44.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Ironworkers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs, from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Ironworkers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
I'm Attorney Tommy Sinyard. When you've been injured and need help, you need a lawyer who's with you.
Sinyard Law.
You need attorneys always available to take care of you.
Sinyard Law.
And keep you in the loop. It's your case. You need to know what's happening.
Sinyard Law.
And never a charge to meet with us to evaluate your case.
Sinyard Law.
A new firm, but an old name. One that will stay with you every step of the way.
Sinyard Law. The name with proven results.
Do you work in an auto manufacturing plant? Are you tired of taking pride in your work without getting the respect you deserve? Consider joining the fight to unionize. Auto workers across the industry are coming together because with a union, we can negotiate for the pay, benefits, and security that we deserve and can help sustain our families. In union plants, workers bargain for long-term wage increases, competitive bonuses, and more affordable benefits. You can join the growing wave of organizing today. Find out more and contact us at Uniting Auto Workers on Facebook or contact UAW Region 8 in Lebanon, Tennessee by going to www.uawregion8.net. That's www.uawregion8.net. A better future is ours.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. We've got a phone number, and the line is open, 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can call or text, and we might bring you on the air or respond to your text message. So, we're going to wrap up here. And what do you want to talk about? How do you want to wrap this up?
Well, I know we had some state stories to talk about. Maybe we could hit. I know I wanted to mention HB 209. Certainly, this won't take long, but I wanted to make sure I talked about this bill while we're on the main show. So I'll start there, and we'll see what we have left. But I wanted to lift up this message from the League of Women Voters of Alabama. This is a nonpartisan group, a very non-controversial group, frankly, if I'm just being honest. And even they are highly opposed to a new piece of legislation that is making its way through the legislature in Alabama. It's called House Bill 209, HB 209. It's already made it out of the House Constitution and Campaign and Elections Committee, is my understanding. And basically, this bill would criminalize providing absentee voting assistance. So, as many listeners know, there's been a lot of discussion of voter fraud in our country. And, many Republicans have been fighting imaginary voter issues. And so this kind of comes out of that, a lot of that rhetoric and a lot of these initiatives to restrict the right to vote, to make it harder to vote. Call me crazy, call me radical. I think we should make it easier for people to vote. And I think that maybe we could do things like having a national holiday for voting day. Maybe we could expand access to early voting and mail-in voting and absentee voting. So that's really the direction we ought to be going in, is to engage more people, to get more people in the process, to make it easier, because it shouldn't be hard for folks to vote and elect their representatives. But of course, that is not how many in the Alabama House of Representatives feel. 42 Alabama House Republicans have come together to co-sponsor this anti-democratic legislation, which would, quote, prohibit any person from distributing, ordering, requesting, collecting, completing, obtaining, or delivering an absentee ballot application or absentee ballot of another person in certain circumstances, and would provide for exceptions. The bill would prohibit any person from receiving a payment or providing a payment to another person for distributing, ordering, requesting, collecting, completing, obtaining, or delivering an absentee ballot application. And the bill would establish criminal penalties for violations. So if HB 209 passes, individuals who help a voter participate in the absentee voting process would be prosecuted and convicted of a Class D felony. Okay, so I was elected to be political coordinator for my local. Most locals have, some kind of role to that effect. Legislative Affairs Committee, a political coordinator, whatever the title may be and the role may be. But one of the things that we do in our unions is try to make sure that our union members participate in elections at the local, state, and national level, so that we can try to have influence on these elections. right? We just talked about our unions, for better or worse, coming out with these endorsements of Joe Biden. Well, that only matters if you can vote. And I get that the absentee voting process is not going to impact the majority of voters, but it will impact voters. And we shouldn't risk a felony by helping our brothers and sisters participate in the election, right? If I deliver an absentee ballot to someone, if I give them a ride to go pick up an absentee ballot or deliver it and drop it off, those shouldn't be activities that are going to risk a felony charge. And it's over nothing. There is no evidence of any wrongdoing here that's being addressed, which is classic Alabama legislature, right? They take a problem that doesn't exist and write a bill that's supposed to be a solution for this non-existent problem that in itself creates new problems that typically violate people's rights. So HB 209 will incite fear and confusion for vulnerable and underserved voters who have in the past obtained information and assistance from trusted, nonpartisan organizations such as the League. If HB 209 passes, voting rights groups, churches, and other nonprofit volunteer organizations would be prohibited from providing nonpartisan free assistance to voters with the absentee ballot request process. It would also criminalize individuals who are working to increase voter participation. So the League of Women Voters of Alabama, the Alabama Voting Rights Coalition, many organizers and advocates and organizations are asking your assistance in defeating HB 209. And if you'd like more information, I recommend an article by Patrick Darrington with the Alabama Political Reporter. And one thing he also discusses is how advocates believe that this bill probably violates the Americans with Disabilities Act, as well as Section 208 of the Voting Rights Act. But again, frequent followers of Alabama legislation know that they have never been deterred from passing a bill for fear it would be unconstitutional. And at no point does Alabama Republicans ever consider that or, stop themselves from passing a bill for fear it could be unconstitutional. So HB 209, it's something that really bothers me as a union member. It bothers me as someone who, believes folks should have a right to vote. And I wanted to make sure I put that information out there.
All right, Adam, appreciate that. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show. We will continue in overtime, though. So make sure that you find us online, Facebook, YouTube, where you can continue listening to the program. So check out my new article in These Times, An Explosion of Layoffs and the End of Paper and J. You can also check out Labor Notes. They are always doing new trainings if you're interested in unionizing your workplace or becoming a better union activist. The Alabama International Fringe Festival is a 3-day event taking place on May 12, 13, and 14, and includes a performance of Tolpuddle, the musical about union struggles in 1800s England. So really excited about that. If I wasn't getting married that weekend, I would be going to that. We're going to be talking to some of them soon about that. Make sure that you bookmark our website, tvlr.fm. Send us some money on tvlr.fm/donate and buy our merch at tvlr.fm/store. Stay tuned for Overtime. You can find us on Facebook and YouTube, where we're going to be talking about Florida a lot. We're going to be talking about Florida a lot, where Desantis is proving that, Republicans don't care about small government, that where Republicans in Florida are attacking working people, attacking their ability to have a living wage, attacking tenants, attacking their unions. Really crazy stuff happening in Florida. We're also going to be talking about Sega Union, the default, lots of stuff, so make sure you stay tuned. And with that, we will see you on the radio next week. All power to the workers. All right, folks, we're off the radio now. Appreciate everybody's time. Like I said, we've got a really great overtime, so stay tuned. We're going to take a really quick break and be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party age player. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Go to Harlan County, there is no neutral there. You'll either be a union man or a thug party age player. Which side are you on? 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 Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell. How the good old union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? 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 Which side are you on?
Welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. Phone number is 844-899-8857. If you want to call in, get in on the conversation, 844-899-TVLR. You can also leave us a voicemail. We might respond to it on the air in the following week if you listen to it as a podcast. You can also send us a text message at the same number. Got some wild stuff going on in the chat. But over on Facebook, appreciate Joe and Mel listening as always. Good morning, folks. Yeah, wild conversations going on in the chat. But,
keep it coming.
Keep it coming. Keep it coming. I don't even know exactly what to say in response to all of this. So I don't have super strong opinions about some of this stuff. But then others
I do want to just for the record say I'm not a fan of Koch brothers. I do not advocate for Koch brothers policy. I know that apparently there's this false dichotomy out there. Either you have to be a bigot who dislikes immigrants, or you're a shill for the Koch brothers and open borders. I was not aware that was my only choice. I wasn't aware of that, but hey, you learn something new every day.
Yeah, you do.
I saw it in a YouTube chat, so it must be true.
There you go. There you go. Like and subscribe if you haven't yet, folks. Like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and share with your friends. So let's talk about this. You want to talk about this the pre-K stuff first, since we didn't get to that in the main show?
Yeah.
Or you want to save that for when you talk about?
You know what? Maybe let's save that. And there's been more to come out since, actually, in just the last couple of days. In fact, so maybe we'll just do a little teaser here. For those of you who did not hear, the state of Alabama has kind of gone to war with its pre-K department, it sounds like. Governor Kay Ivey has bounced out the head of the pre-K department, Dr. Barbara Cooper, and it was primarily over a textbook that teachers were using, right? Teacher training textbook, just to be clear, not something that the children would ever see. But Governor Ivey claims she received a complaint about so-called woke concepts in a book. You know, concepts like treating people with respect and dignity. Controversial things like understanding that families may look different. And in fact, not every student you serve is going to have the same kind of family. Wild ideas like that. So we'll talk more about that either next week or the week after that. Teacher Appreciation Week's coming up, so we're going to have a lot more education focus over the next couple weeks. So we'll get into more details there, but I did want to lift up that the reporting by Rebecca Griesbach with AO.com. In fact, she put out an article where she looked at how they have cut pre-K equity resources since this firing of Dr. Cooper. And I believe they reduced the use of the word equity by 90%, because even the word equity apparently is a little scary. So yeah, it's a shame to see, more of this kind of culture war nonsense. If only the folks who use the word woke could define that for us. It's just become kind of a catch-all term for anything that they don't like or anything that might, indicate that folks deserve to be treated respectfully regardless of who they are. It's sad. So we'll talk more about it later on, but just stay tuned to that story. There's a lot happening there. Governor Ivey, they woke her up and, got her out of bed, got her dressed, got her to go fire someone. So that's what's happening with our governor. So they can pour through the textbooks of pre-K teachers and just see if they can find anything that might indicate you should treat people decently.
Yeah. Some good news on the state grocery tax front, though, right?
Yeah, there is some decent news, I guess you could say. Alabama Rise just put out a statement, I believe yesterday, day before, perhaps. And so Senator Andrew Jones, who is a Republican from Center Alabama, he has filed legislation this week to reduce Alabama's state sales tax on groceries. And the interesting thing about it is this bill, which is SB 257, is co-sponsored by all 35 state senators. So I mean, that's kind of amazing in itself that literally all 35 state senators would agree to co-sponsor one single bill.
Yeah.
Alabama Rise Executive Director Robin Hayden released the following statement Friday in response. Alabama Rise is thrilled to see widespread bipartisan support from every senator for reducing the state sales tax on groceries. We support Senator Andrew Jones's legislation and appreciate the leadership that he and Rep. Penny McClammy have shown on this issue. It's time for lawmakers to seize this opportunity to untax groceries and improve life for every Alabamian. Reducing and ultimately eliminating the state grocery tax would make it easier for families to make ends meet. It would remove Alabama from the shameful list of 3 states with no tax break on groceries. It would also be an important step toward righting the wrongs of our state's upside-down tax system. Alabamians with low and moderate incomes pay a higher share of their incomes in state and local taxes than the wealthiest households, and high sales taxes, particularly on food, are a major reason why. Quite simply, there are better ways for Alabama to raise revenue than taxing a necessity of life. It will be important, however, to ensure any grocery tax cut doesn't harm our children's education in the long term. The state grocery tax brings in more than $600 million a year for the Education Trust Fund. That's about 7% of this year's total ETF budget, making it a significant funding source for public schools. Revenues are likely strong enough for now to reduce the state grocery tax without causing severe harm to education funding, but history tells us that good economic times won't last forever. Lawmakers should use the coming months to identify and agree to a lasting solution to replace the state grocery tax. Arise is open to numerous ideas for replacement revenue. We continue to support Senator Marika Coleman's proposal to untax groceries and end the state income tax deduction for federal income tax payments. Alabama is the only state to allow this full deduction, which overwhelmingly benefits wealthy households. Closing this skewed loophole would protect funding for public schools and ensure Alabama can afford to end the state sales tax on groceries forever. Alabama Rise members have advocated for decades to end the state grocery tax, and the people of Alabama strongly support this effort. The time for excuses and delays is over. It's time for our lawmakers to untax groceries. So that was from Robin Hayden, Executive Director of Alabama Rise, which is a statewide member-led nonprofit organization advancing public policies to improve the lives of Alabamians who are marginalized by poverty. And Arise's membership includes faith-based, community, nonprofit, and civic groups, grassroots leaders, and individuals from across Alabama. They have been doing a lot of hard work on this very issue of untaxing groceries. But I do appreciate that in Robin's statement, she made it clear that we have to look out for education funding as well. Mm-hmm. And that has been one of the issues that has prevented the grocery tax cut from being implemented so far. And frankly, it looks to me like there's not a lot of demand right now in the legislature to replace any of the revenue that they're cutting.
Yeah.
They're cutting revenue left and right, tax cuts left and right. Tax cuts that are disproportionately not helping us working people. Mm-hmm. Last year, there were tens of millions of dollars worth of cuts that were made that comes out of the Education Trust Fund. This year, there's a lot more that's being proposed and looks to go through. So, as we have said on this show numerous times, the grocery tax is just totally uncalled for. We shouldn't tax groceries, and it disproportionately hurts poor people. But at the same time, we shouldn't cut education funding just to do that. And I think it's important that we lift up all workers. And that's what bothers me, is our politicians always give us these false choices, that we have to hurt one group of workers to help another group of workers, and vice versa. But what about not doing that?
Right.
What about not screwing over working people?
Yeah.
What about helping all working people better afford their groceries and protecting schools and educators and students? Seems like something we can do. It's something we should do. So there's good news on the grocery tax front. It does look like it's more likely than ever to be repealed. And that's good news for us working people. The not so good news is we're not sure if any of that money is going to be replaced for our schools. And so, obviously that's a huge chunk, 7% of the budget. That's people's jobs.
Yeah.
That's class sizes. That's resources available for students. That's projects to fix the playground and paint the school and you name it. So it's a complicated issue. Happy to see movement on the grocery tax repeal, but I am as a former educator, and I'm just very concerned about all these cuts that are happening to the Education Trust Fund. Because there's more money than normal this year in the budget, everybody's wanting to just cut left and right and take out taxes, and it's gonna catch up with us. It absolutely will, and that's what worries me, is that we have an austerity on the way.
And one of the things that is most disappointing, and we mentioned this last time, is that among the people who is giving this argument air that we don't need to replace the funding explicitly is the leader of the Democrats in the House, Anthony Daniels. He is just, giving credence to this argument that, maybe if we cut this tax on groceries, then the money will just appear magically somehow, somewhere.
Right. And the thing is, of course there will be some stimulus effect, but the idea that it will create enough taxable revenue to replace it seems
just
silly. And worth noting on that front that Anthony Daniels' overtime tax cut bill is moving through the legislature. It got a favorable report. It got a lot of praise from Republicans and Democrats, both calling it innovative and groundbreaking and all this. And there again, I think it would be good to reduce the taxes on overtime pay. If you work hard, you work enough hours, and you're away from your family long enough to earn overtime pay, getting a little bit of a tax break on that would be nice. Right. But it's also millions and millions out of the Education Trust Fund that will no longer appear. And again, that's you're helping one set of workers, but what about all the workers who never make it to overtime because they're working 2 or 3 jobs to make ends meet, right? There's a lot of folks who are not allowed to get more than 40 hours at their job. Mm-hmm. That's a very common thing for workers to not be allowed to get overtime. So
yeah, and the idea sometimes not every bill is going to be able to positively impact every single group of folks, and I understand that, and that's okay. But the biggest thing for me is the again not replacing the revenue.
Yeah, they've leaned real hard on the tax cut side of things.
Yeah,
and basically
and the
they've
idea
said
that you couldn't yes, okay, cut the tax for overtime pay, and let's replace that revenue with a tax on profits or something.
Right.
On capital gains, on people who are making money off of owning money. The idea, and that would be good, because that is already taxed at a much lower rate than labor is, which is just an insane kind of thing to think about. The reality that you are taxed more on the sweat of your brow than your boss is on their capital gains,
right?
On the profits from owning things.
Yeah.
It's just
that's my concern with the Alabama Democrats, is that they have found some common ground on certain tax cuts with Republicans. Hey, Republicans, you love to cut taxes. How about we cut taxes for regular people? Okay, fair enough. But they haven't paired that with any sort of plan to make up that revenue and to prevent austerity down the road. They are not pushing for the FIT plan that Arise is pushing for. Mm-hmm. Some of them are, like Senator Coleman, but I haven't seen Anthony Daniels write an op-ed on how we need to raise revenue, how we need to tax the wealthy in loopholes that benefit the wealthy, such as the FIT, the federal income tax deduction. We could get rid of that, and very few people would notice it. Only the wealthiest people would notice it. What about property? Alabama has some of the lowest property taxes in the state. In particular, land that is classified as quote unquote timber. And so that's like the real one that they're never going to want to touch, because then you start looking at some of the most wealthy, powerful interests in the state, including the out-of-state interests who own much of this quote unquote timber land. You know, I don't get why, you know, land that across the border in Georgia is going to be taxed higher than in Alabama. The exact same land, the same piece of property, right, could span across the state line, and they would pay a little bit more in tax in Georgia. It's just, but it's one of those things that it may help. It may help having these tax cuts for working people in terms of our overtime pay and in terms of our grocery bill. But there are consequences if it's not paired with any new revenue sources. Alabama already has the second lowest amount of revenue raised in the country. Only Tennessee raises less in taxes, and Tennessee actually raises more if you factor in the lottery, because we don't have a lottery. We don't have casino gambling.
Right.
We don't have sports betting. And all those we don't have legal marijuana. Those are all, you know, sources of revenue for other states around us that Alabama refuses to engage in, because if Alabama raises revenue, they might, maybe, just maybe, have to spend it to help regular people.
Yeah.
And of course, that's the biggest no-no in the state.
Let's talk about some good news, even though it has some complicated details, and that is that on Monday, the Teamsters announced that 84 Amazon delivery drivers and dispatchers in Palmdale, California, the site of Amazon's DAX-8 facility, had unionized, and that the Teamsters Local 396 union had reached a tentative agreement, the first of any Amazon workers in the United States. The workers are employed by battle-tested Strategies, one of Amazon's roughly 3,000 delivery service partners. And that employer granted voluntary union recognition after a majority of workers signed union authorization cards. We've got footage from the rally and march that happened when the workers announced their unionization from a listener of the show that was there, Will Pena. I saw him in the chat. Appreciate you sending us that. So, Adam, let's play this clip that we got.
All right, here we go.
Teamsters win! Teamsters fight! Teamsters win! What do we want? Contract! When do we want it? Now! What do we want? Contract! When do we want it? Now! Where Teamsters fight! Teamsters win! Where Teamsters fight! Teamsters win!
Good stuff there. Love seeing that. And so now the tentative agreement is out to the members for ratification. We'll see what they say, but the union says that the contract includes immediate raises, health and safety standards, and a grievance procedure, which is all very good things. And the grievance procedure, you know, the just cause discipline and firing mechanisms are really an under-talked about benefit of unionization. You know, the idea that you can go into work with confidence that, you know, as long as I do my job and I meet the standards of my contract, my boss cannot legally, you know, harass me or discipline me or do any kind, you know, as long as I do my job, I don't have to worry about anything else. I don't have to, you know, and that's not true when you don't have a union contract, when you don't have just cause disciplinary procedures in your contract, as workers without a union contract do not. So that's a really good stuff. Alex Press had a great article in Jacobin that I'm leaning heavily on that details some of the complexities about this, though. Because like I mentioned, while they deliver Amazon packages, they drive Amazon trucks, they wear Amazon uniforms, they technically do not work for Amazon. They work for Battle-Tested Strategies, which is a contractor. Immediately after the announcement from the Teamsters Union on Twitter, there was speculation among, you know, folks on labor Twitter, quote unquote, wondering if Amazon would just kill the contract, right? Because since they're not these are not Amazon employees, quote unquote, they're employees of Battle-Tested Strategies. So Battle-Tested Strategies has a contract that comes up for renewal every so often, and Amazon could just choose to not renew the contract, theoretically. although I'm not sure if that would be illegal because if you could prove that it was associated with unionization, I'm not sure. But there were definitely some fears there. And confirming some of those fears, Amazon put out a statement later that day saying that BTS, quote, had a track record of failing to perform and had been notified of its termination for poor performance well before today's announcement. The following day, however, Alex notes, in comments to The Guardian, BTS owner Jonathan Irvin disputed Amazon claims, noting that the company's current contract doesn't expire until October 3rd and that the newly unionized drivers are currently delivering Amazon packages. So, conflicting statements from the owner of BTS and from Amazon, but that points to the big complication in organizing Amazon's drivers, which is that many, maybe most of Amazon's drivers aren't technically Amazon employees, and so that makes unionization hard. Alex notes that David Wheel called this a fissured workplace when you have all of these subcontractors and subcontractors.
Right.
And so if Amazon fights this, I imagine that we'll see the Teamsters try to enforce a joint employer standard, which the Alphabet Workers Union was actually able to do with YouTube and Google, which forced all of the parent companies to bargain with the newly unionized YouTube music workers who work for a contractor for YouTube, which is which Google is a parent company of. So there are, there's some reason to be optimistic about the state support for these workers, but it is definitely, there's some definitely some complications there. But the best way to combat these complications would be for more of these Amazon drivers working for contractors or working for Amazon directly to unionize, because the thing that unions bring is the collective power of the workers. And so when more of these people join unions, well, because it would, in the same way that in one workplace, if one person quits, well, the thing isn't, it's not really going to be that big of an impact to the organization's daily operations. But if and so similarly, if Amazon cancels one of their contractors' contracts, well, they'll be able to replace it. But if all of the drivers at all of these contractors unionized, well, they wouldn't be able to do that anymore because all of them would be unionized. So there would be no benefit from canceling these contracts. So that would be the advice that I have to Amazon drivers.
Keep it up. keep it up.
So.
And, that makes me think about the Teamsters bus drivers here in Huntsville, because I think you and I probably had a similar conversation. Like, now that the school bus drivers in Huntsville are organized with the Teamsters, do you think the school board will try to cancel the contract or maybe move to a new contractor? So that's something, to keep our eyes on as well, and that is the danger with the subcontracting. But ultimately, like you said, the answer is unionize everywhere. Keep on organizing and unionize everywhere. That's the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. While we're talking about Teamsters, in addition to Will Pino, we also have Jose Negrete in the chat, who is a UPS driver, a 22-4, if I remember correctly, who was featured, his words, actually opened an episode of The Upsurge, which is a podcast specifically dedicated to the negotiations between the Teamsters Union and UPS. So that was very exciting to hear a familiar name in that podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really cool.
Yeah, pretty cool. So glad to hear. It was good hearing you there, Negrete, and definitely recommend checking out The Upsurge. I have now listened to all 6 episodes. Jose in the chat says, no, I'm a part-timer, which is different than a 22.4. Okay. So, but yeah, definitely would recommend listening to The Upsurge. It's a great podcast. Good stuff. So, with that, let's go ahead and talk about Florida. There's just so much going on in Florida. And so much of my information about Florida is coming from McKenna Schuler. You can follow her on Twitter at @SheCarriesOn. She writes for the Orlando Weekly. Yep. And so definitely recommend following her. Her articles are always really good, always really well sourced, always talking to workers, which is nice to see. And so the first thing is about, which is the most public thing, which is really kind of lame that among these 4 stories that I'm going to be talking about, this is the most public story. This is the one that people know the most about, which is really gross. But that is the DeSantis' fight with Disney. DeSantis has been fighting with Disney because they're just too nice to gay people is basically the thing. And Disney is now fighting back, saying that because the attempt to claw back the special statuses that Disney has in Florida, which exempts them from some regulations or something, gives them kind of special governing authority within their jurisdiction, which is wild. That just seems really inappropriate. But they have those. And so Disney is saying that because the attempt to claw some of those back is in retaliation of their political stances, which is true, and that's not even something that DeSantis would deny. I think DeSantis has been explicit that all of these attacks on Disney has been because they disagree with him about some things. So Disney says that because of that, because it's in retaliation of their political stances, that doing this, this retaliation is unconstitutional and a violation of the First Amendment because they say, the company has a right to freedom of speech just like individuals do, unquote. Now, I do not agree with that. I do not agree with that because corporations are a government-created fiction. Created to shield individuals from liability. To be a corporation even at all, you have to ask the government's permission because corporations do not grow in nature. Corporations are societal creations. And so I do not think that it is appropriate that corporations have free speech rights. I think that's just a really, really crazy kind of thing that we have allowed in this country. But even though I don't agree with the statement that the company has freedom of speech just like individuals do, the Supreme Court does. That's what they decided in Citizens United. And, I don't know on a constitutional level how much water their argument holds. I don't believe in corporate personhood. And I reckon multi-billion-dollar international corporations ought to pay a lot of taxes. And I also know that the Supreme Court has said that corporations are persons. But I don't know that now that it is a corporation saying this on behalf of liberal social issues, I kind of would tend to doubt that the Supreme Court would fall on that side, but we'll see, I guess. But what I want to highlight is how this episode shows how Republicans are not ideologically small government. They are not ideologically opposed to state power, which is something this is absolutely something that we have, that working folks know and understand, and particularly working people who fight for better working conditions and better lives for themselves and their families and their communities. But it's something that a lot of people like to pretend is not true. A lot of people like to pretend that Republicans are the small government party and that they are, live and let live. They don't like to use state power. But that's just not the case. They are willing to use state power, as we are seeing in this fight with Disney. I mean, DeSantis is really leveraging the power of the state of Florida against this corporation. But he's not doing it because of low wages. He's not doing it because of unsafe working conditions. He's not doing it because the corporation is infringing on their workers' actual constitutional rights to freedom of speech and freedom of association. So he's not doing this. He's not trying to raise more taxes from Florida because they want to pay for more constituent services, because they want to ensure that more people are better taken care of by the state of Florida. Ronald DeSantis is using state power because he reckons this corporation is a bit too nice to the gays. And that's just really freaking gross. That is just absolutely, because, remember this the next time you hear a conversation in the media about how the government shouldn't raise the minimum wage because that's not the government's role. The government shouldn't be picking winners and losers when we talk about subsidies for certain industries or increasing penalties for this type of behavior, this or that type of behavior. Because they're not opposed to the utilization of state power. They are only opposed to the utilization of state power when that utilization of state power benefits working people. If we're talking about using state power to raise wages, to make working conditions safer, to empower workers to fight for themselves, to make sure that tenants are not abused by their landlords, then they're like, oh no, small government, small government, small government. We can't do this because that's the private sector. It's totally different. We can't do that. It's not right. We got to be you gotta abide by the free market. But here they're willing to do this because because this corporation is just a bit too gay friendly. I mean, it's just really, really freaking gross.
Yeah, I mean, it really speaks to like that essential contradiction within the right wing in this country and in general. But at the end of the day, they are for capital, by capital, of capital, but their social reactionary ideas sometimes butt up against capitalism. And so here's a classic case here where, ordinarily DeSantis and his ilk would, gladly give Disney all the tax breaks they want, the low taxes and subsidies and anything else, overlook any safety issues, turn a blind eye to any malfeasance, right? Because that's generally how they operate is, they're on the behalf of corporations. But, from time to time, these socially reactionary kind of ideas butt up against that. And sometimes you also see sort of a bourgeoisie, petty bourgeoisie kind of conflict as well, right? And I think that's sort of what's contained within the right wing, those contradictions. And sometimes, like Trump was also an example of that. Some of Trump's policies were not preferred by other elements of the capitalist class. The capitalist class is not fully united. They're united in trying to make lives worse for working people, of course, but how that plays out can differ. And there are different factions within the capitalist class. And, there's a certain strain of reactionary politics in this country that is willing to butt up against the interest of capital from time to time. But as you said, not to help people, but to further divide people. And it seems to me that the right wing in this country has really seized on trans folks as the new punching bag. In the 2000s, it was the gays. Of course, immigrants have always been a punching bag of the right. But, they have, over time, they have swapped enemies. So in the 2000s, it was the gays and the Muslims that we were supposed to be scared of, that we were supposed to, allow the government to discriminate against. Now it's trans folks, because we're talking about 1-2% of the population, a very small amount of people that they can easily bully and rile people up in opposition to. They can cater to some of the worst elements of our society and some of the worst ideas of our society, and just cater to bigotry to try to get votes. And it's really sickening, just sickening. At no point would I ever be inclined to defend a mega corporation like Disney. But yeah, it's like two bad guys fighting each other for bad reasons. I mean, it's just bad.
Yeah, bad guys fighting for bad reasons, and I hope they both lose in some way. I hope that I mean, my whatever the process is, I think it would be a good outcome for Disney to lose these special statuses and to be governed more by the people of Florida. And I think that, the idea that that commission that's supposed to govern Disney or something, Disney World, the idea that they were able to circumvent that is funny, but also like not good for, society that a corporation could have potentially just like been like, nah, we don't want to do this, what the government says. So, ideally, what would happen is that they lose their special status, they pay more taxes, but also somehow they're able to politically weaken Desantis and, I don't know, like make him cry and become irrelevant or something. I don't know. So we'll see what happens. We're probably not going to update you anymore, but on that story. But it is, it is, what's the word? Archetypal. It is archetypal of the, of the reactionary right.
Right.
And their willingness to fight corporations, but not actually for workers or good folks.
Right. They occasionally will fight them, but for the wrong reasons. And, we see that with Alabama a lot of times where folks will say, oh, Alabama is so backwards that it's actually hurting our ability to recruit businesses. There are some corporations who are, hesitant to come to a state that is so socially reactionary, that embraces bigotry as public policy. And, so that's something that, Alabama Republicans have to debate amongst themselves. Like, okay, we want to do the bigotry, but we want the profit making too. Right. So which one's going to win out,
In other Florida news, an anti-union bill just passed the House. It passed the Senate earlier this month, so it's headed to DeSantis' desk for his signature. In all likelihood, he is going to sign it. And it is a huge attack on frontline workers in Florida. Public educators, school counselors, municipal workers, public health care workers, and a whole host of other frontline workers that McKenna Schuler notes in our article were lauded as heroes during the COVID-19 pandemic. But now these 150,000 working Floridians and their unions have new requirements that are going to be imposed on them by the state. Although unions representing cops, firefighters, corrections, and probation officers would be exempted from its provisions, having been categorized by the Republican bill sponsors as belonging to a special risk category, which is absolutely BS. We know that's BS. They just like cops and they don't like teachers. That's the thing. That's all it does. Because, and McKenna says in one of her tweets about this that, the bill's sponsors, their assertions are that this will actually help unions. This is going to help unions. Despite that, not a single union member came out in support of this bill during public testimony or to thank the bill's sponsors for bringing it forward. But the sponsors still assert that this is going to be helpful for unions. But then, if it's going to be helpful for unions, why don't you impose this on the cops? That's super weird. It's super weird if you think this is actually going to be helpful for the teachers and their organizations. Why would you not impose that on the cops? Do you hate cops? Is that what you want me to believe? No, of course not. Of course not. This is a bill specifically meant to attack teachers and public healthcare workers, municipal workers, anybody in the state of Florida who has the gall to fight for themselves and their families and their fellow workers. So what the bill would do is ban payroll deduction of union dues for public sector union members who, remember, already have to willingly sign up to pay dues in the first place. Florida is a right to rec state, right to work, meaning that you don't have to pay union dues. The state forces the employer and the union to not have fees for the union in their contracts. In other states, the government stays out of this decision and allows in the private sector the workers and management to decide whether or not they want to have this in their contract. But in Florida, the state comes in, again, utilizing state power here, and says, no, it is illegal for you to have this in your contract. And so workers have to, on their own, individually say, I want to pay dues to the union. And so this says that, no, you can't have dues deduction on your paychecks.
Right. And also we should note that there are deductions that happen on paychecks of teachers and other public sector workers beyond union dues. Okay. Right. There are other forms of deductions, whether it's supplemental insurance products that they buy. Right. They buy a disability insurance policy from central office, and that's taken out of their paycheck. Or maybe they donate to the United Way with every paycheck. Right. I don't know all the specifics in Florida and exactly what deductions are currently allowed, but I feel very certain from working in and around this kind of system here in Alabama that deductions to the AFT and the NEA are not the only deductions that are happening.
Right.
And so it's not as if this is like a special there's not a ton of state resources that are being drained by doing this. It's a spreadsheet. And someone clicks a few buttons and sends the file every month. There is no good reason to do this unless you are attempting to hurt the unions and hurt their membership. And the reason why that works is because dues deduction through your paycheck is simply easier for the members. Yeah. And the alternative of members having to pay with their credit card or through draft out of their checking account, of course they can do that, but it's more difficult because people's cards expire, people move, people change banks. All these different things happen. And I experienced that firsthand in Alabama with the Alabama Education Association because there was a very similar attack on AEA and their dues deduction. And, I saw the transition from one to the other. It's definitely an attack on membership.
Absolutely. Interestingly, during the public comment section, Chris Payne, a Republican teacher, a Republican educator of 32 years and a former soldier, a former soldier from Nassau County, told lawmakers during one of the bill's committee stops, quote, "Don't tell me how to handle my paycheck. It's not big enough anyway, so don't tell me what to do with it." Which is reasonable, right? If I want dues deducted from my paycheck, then let me freaking do it. It's my money. But the Florida government is saying, no, we're going to tell you how you can use your paycheck, and you can't have dues deduction. Some of the other things that it will do is impose annual auditing requirements, and it would also require public employee unions to reach or maintain a 60% membership rate among eligible employees or risk facing decertification, and consequently the loss of a union contract.
Which is just totally arbitrary and will unnecessarily hurt people.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now the decertification wouldn't happen automatically. It would be it would trigger a recertification vote, is what McKenna says in her article, which is better than automatic decertification, but it's still really, really, it's super arbitrary. And one of the questions would be, typically, The thing is, a majority. If a majority of employees want to, be members of their unions, then that's what it takes to get a union in. That's what it takes to get a union out. Why wouldn't you just say a majority? And well, McKenna has some reporting on that, showing that of the 15 largest teachers unions, all of them have membership over 50%, but only 3 of them have membership over 60%. And the teachers unions also say that Desantis aide was calling around all the teachers unions, asking them what their membership percentages was. And so it's just a blatant attack on these unions, on their ability to, utilize their resources in the most effective ways possible, because this is going to mean having to devote resources to elections every other year or every year if you're not able to maintain over 60% membership. And it's just going to waste resources that could be going towards research or organizing or representing members. And instead, you're having to win an election all the time. It's just, yeah. But if you lose the election, that was triggered not because workers were agitated and wanted to get rid of their union, but because the government triggered an election because the membership fell below the arbitrary threshold of 60%, then you lose the union contract automatically. You don't even have it until the expiration date. You lose it automatically. And that includes scheduled raises, health benefits, retirement savings plans, scheduling. All of that goes out the door if the union loses the election, and then you're totally at the whim of your boss. Bad stuff going on in Florida. Here's another one. Republicans now want to prevent local governments from requiring companies they contract with pay their employees a living wage that exceeds Florida's current minimum wage. So this is not since 2003, Florida already had a law that prohibited local governments from passing ordinance that would require private employers to pay wages higher than the state minimum wage, right? So you can't, as of 2003, a local government couldn't say, okay, within our city limits, everybody has to pay higher than the state minimum wage. Since 2003, that's been illegal. But now they want to come in and say, okay, local government, not only can you not do that, you can't even have standards for your contractors, which is crazy. How are you going to come in and tell a government that you can't have standards when it comes to safety, when it comes to wages, when it comes to benefits and scheduling and all this kind of stuff? That is super material to the execution of the contract. That is in the best interest for the constituents to have a body that is able to set these standards when it comes to these contracts. And so the state government is just coming in and saying, nope, you can't do that. Just really crazy stuff here. And what is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of this? Because it's not like the constituents in these areas are agitated about this. There's no popular upsurge in the city of Orlando or the city of Tampa or the city of Miami, where they have some of these ordinances saying, we want to make sure that our city contractors have the ability to pay their workers as little as possible. That's just simply not happening in these cities. Because if it was, then they would be electing city councilors to repeal this ordinance. All it is Republicans from outside of these areas trying to benefit corporations, that contract with these cities, that maybe some of these contractors donate to these Republicans' campaigns in other parts of the state. And so they want to make their, they want to make their buddies whole. They want to make sure that their buddies have are able to spend less money on workers when they work for the city of Miami or the city of Orlando. It is simply not to make working people's lives better. But here again, they're willing to use state power. They're willing to use state power, and this isn't even for a socially reactionary thing. This is just nakedly anti-worker. Here's the last thing about Florida. On Wednesday, the Republican-dominated House, and all of this, I'm getting all of this reporting from McKenna Schuler. Really great. You can follow her at She Carries On Twitter. You can read her writing in the Orlando Weekly. So on Wednesday, the Republican-dominated Florida House passed a bill, 81-33, that would wipe out local government's renters' protections across Florida, preempting to the state all local policies that affect landlord-tenant relations, including tenant protections implemented in Central Florida. 46 ordinances in 35 cities and counties would be affected by the bill. That includes Orange County's Tenant Bill of Rights and its fair notice requirements. The Tenant Bill of Rights contains anti-discrimination protections that aren't currently guaranteed under state law. Anti-discrimination policies. That's what the Republicans in Florida are trying to get rid of. Another one is Orange County's ordinance protects tenants against source of income discrimination. Not against income discrimination, because that's like a big thing, right? That's not totally unreasonable that if you're a landlord and the rent is $3,000 a month, you wouldn't want somebody making only $2,000 a month to rent that apartment. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about source of income discrimination. What is your job occupation? You can't discriminate based on that. And that is an issue that largely affects renters of color, women, people with disabilities. The ordinance also offers protection against discrimination on the basis of actual or perceived status as a victim of domestic violence, dating violence, or stalking. I mean, just imagine this. Republicans in the state of Florida are saying, no, renters should not be protected from landlords from discrimination on the basis of being a victim of domestic violence. Just the cruelty. I can't think of any other reason than the cruelty is the point. Right? Because these are things that people in blue areas, by and large, have been able to force their governments to pass, to, by some modicum, by some modest measure, protect their living standards, increase their quality of life, increase their freedom from their landlord, from their bosses. And the Republicans are coming in here and saying, no, we are firmly on the side of capital, and we want your life to be worse if you're not a capitalist. Just gross stuff here. Next thing we wanted to talk about is this, the defaulting on our debt for the United States. And Adam, you had some stuff you wanted to say about that, right?
Yeah, give me just a second here. Let me get that pulled up.
Yeah. I mean, as a preview to kind of open this up, there's a big debate in the United States House about the debt limit. And so there's this crazy there's just this really bizarre thing that says, okay, even though, there are actually even questions as to its constitutionality, because even though Congress has required the government to expend this certain amount of money by passing appropriations laws, there is this second thing, that's the debt limit, that says, oh no, actually you can't do this. You can't go above, you can't borrow more than this amount of money.
Yeah, and the debt limit is not like enshrined in the Constitution or anything by, anything to that effect.
Right.
It could easily be done away with. They
Right.
could have eliminated the debt limit already. They could still do so, obviously not with the makeup of the Congress right now, at least not likely to happen. But, yeah, and so you've got the House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has a plan of austerity and is demanding significant cuts to social services and work requirements to social services in exchange, basically, for, basically they're holding the country hostage and saying you're going to pass this austerity or we're going to let the country default. So I did want to just highlight the AFL-CIO's statement on the matter, and they put this out just this week. And ahead of today's vote in the U.S. House on the Limit, Save, Grow Act of 2023 proposed by Republican leaders, the AFL-CIO, America's largest labor federation representing more than 12.5 million working people, strongly urged Congress to reject House Speaker Kevin McCarthy's plan to careen our nation into default, which would tank the economy and put millions of workers at risk. In a letter to Congress, the Federation calls out the bill for posing an imminent threat to the retirement security of hundreds of thousands of Americans, cutting life-supporting benefits and programs for veterans, seniors, children, and low-income families. This misguided legislation will also harm our economy by slashing vital federal investments in clean energy and new technologies that will expand domestic manufacturing and put millions of people to work. Here is an excerpt from that letter they sent to Congress. Quote, by clawing back unused COVID-19 relief funds, the McCarthy plan would slash funding for veterans' medical care, vaccines, personal protective equipment, and public transit agencies. It could also jeopardize the unspent funds in the multi-employer pension rescue plan, the Butch-Lewis Act that was included in the American Rescue Plan Act. Destroying the retirement income security of more than 1 million hardworking Americans is an outrageous and unacceptable price for a debt deal. The McCarthy plan also would dim hopes of transitioning into a cleaner energy economy and rebuilding our manufacturing base around clean energy jobs. The United States is in a position to become a dominant producer of high-tech goods, from wind turbines to solar to electric vehicles. Rescinding the Inflation Reduction Act's clean energy tax credits would cede the clean energy future to China and raise taxes on our businesses that are trying to remain globally competitive while combating climate change. The cuts in the McCarthy plan would fall disproportionately on the backs of federal workers and undermine the ability of government agencies to fulfill their mission to serve the American people. So, interesting statement there. AFL-CIO is certainly opposed to this plan by House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. I would imagine most of the unions are as well. I thought it was interesting that they made it a point to mention China in the letter. I think that's probably them trying to triangulate a little bit and speak to some of the congressmen on a level that they understand. Because if there's anything that Congress seems to like right now, it's bashing China.
Right.
So I imagine that was probably the thinking and throwing that little dig in there.
Yeah, weird stuff for sure.
So we'll see what happens.
I just have a hard time believing that the Republicans are going to be able to go through with this, because the idea that they would be willing to send the nation into default for the first time in order to take more money from poor people is just difficult to grok, it seems to me, because it would be obvious that, it would be their fault, right? And it's just difficult for me to buy that would go over well in the general public. But
yeah, it may not go over well, but that doesn't necessarily mean they won't do it.
Yeah.
And at this point, nothing would surprise me. So I haven't been following the blow by blow in DC very closely. I've been kind of waiting to see, as we get closer and how things are going to shake out. But yeah, I agree. I mean, it does seem hard to imagine that the Republicans would do that because, they're because they want to make people meet certain jump through hoops and meet work requirements to get health care or food stamps. But, again, it would not surprise me if they did go down that road. And who knows, there could be political calculations as well. Maybe they think, well, if we do it under a Democratic president, the Democratic president will get the blame.
Right.
It's, that's also, very cynical. But again, I assume that they are cynical in the way they operate.
Right. Let's go back to some good news. There's a Sega union. For a general overview, we're going to cut to our friends from Means Morning News.
Turning now to unionization efforts at a brand that all gamers are familiar with, Sega. Remember a few weeks ago, TikTok user The Swoletariat posted a video featuring Sonic the Hedgehog giving tips on how to unionize the workplace.
Union that fits your needs. Share the info with your coworkers. Sign those union cards. When you've got enough support, file a petition with the National Labor Relations Board. Win the election and negotiate a contract. Together, you'll make your workplace better and fairer for everyone. Gotta unionize fast.
Well, now the creators of Sonic are taking the advice to heart. Workers at Sega's American headquarters in California announced that they had formed a union with the Communication Workers of America. 144 of the roughly 170 employees at the company already agreed to join the union, so even if Sega refuses to recognize it, a National Labor Relations Board election victory is all but assured. The workers are calling the union Allied Employees Guild Improving Sega, or AGIS, and they're seeking better pay and benefits, more opportunities for remote work, and better staffing to avoid crunch scenarios. That's when developers have to work long hours in the run-up to a game's release. And the bargaining unit would stretch across Sega's corporate operations. It includes not just the game developers, but also the marketing, quality assurance, and design departments. It would be the first interdepartmental video game union in the industry. So that's something to get excited about. No word yet on if Tails has signed a union card, or if Dr. Robotnik will seek the help of union-busting legal services.
Great to hear that good news. And, we've seen a trend of more and more workers in the video game industry are interested in unionizing for some of the reasons Sam just explained: the crunch time, the working conditions, pay, of course, input in the job, all the reasons why folks join unions and create unions. And it's really good to see that starting to spread into this really important industry. Video games are a huge business. And, like any industry, we need union labor in that industry. And so love to see that with Sega. I don't know about you, Jacob, but definitely played plenty of Sega growing up. Sega Genesis, Sega Dreamcast. How about the Sega Dreamcast, folks? Y'all remember that one? I remember the 56, was it 56K internet? Dial-up internet. I remember the dial-up internet and, plugging the phone line into the back of the Dreamcast. And, we had to just pray that no one would call the house when we were trying to play online. So, yeah, got some good memories from Sega for sure. And it's really, really just cool to see unionization spreading into Sega. And I hope it spreads because, from the reporting we've seen, especially over the last year or two, there's definitely a lot of issues inside the video game industry. And unionization is one of the key ways that they can make that industry a better place to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And the and the video game industry pulls something that in a bit of a different way that like nonprofit and service centered workplaces do. You know, like when teachers are asking for more or when nurses are asking for more, the employers always try to pit, they try to pit the patients or the students against the teachers, when in reality, they have very similar interests. And they're also told, this is a calling. You're not supposed to be in this for the money, right? And so the video game industry really does a similar thing where they're like, oh, it's everybody's dream to play
You love
video
games, don't you?
Yeah.
You love the video games. You get to make
Right.
them. How lucky you are.
How lucky you are while you're working 80-hour weeks in the run up to a game's release, and then we're immediately going to lay you off for a few months after that. Yeah, they really take advantage of folks, and it's good to see people fighting back.
Absolutely.
So, Adam, have you got a clip of this musical that's going to be in Montgomery?
You know what? I did not get the clip pulled to show this week.
Okay.
I think what we'll do is we'll show that next week, and hoping to speak to Ryan Thornhill, the director of the musical. But I did want to, remind folks there is this festival going on down in the Montgomery-Prattville area. It's called the Alabama International Fringe Festival, and it's a 3-day event taking place on May 12th, 13th, and 14th in the River region, centered in Montgomery. And that includes a performance of Toll Puddle, the musical, which is a musical about Union struggles in 1800s England, which I find really interesting. I'm not a big musical guy, but when I found out there was a Union-themed musical and it was happening here in Alabama, that was definitely exciting. So hoping to speak to the director of the musical next week, and we'll play a little clip for you so you can have an idea. But if you're in the area, if you're pretty close to Montgomery, Prattville area, definitely check it out in a couple weeks. I hope it's very successful.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing more about that, even though I won't be able to attend. Yeah, so Adam, talk to us about what you're watching and listening to this month.
So last month, I didn't do a labor film and song of the month. I know, my apologies. I'm so sorry. I did not get to it. And of course, March is Women's History Month, and that was sort of on my mind as I made the picks for this month. So for April's labor film of the month, I'm highlighting one of my favorite movies, not just about labor, but in general. In an Oscar-winning performance, Sally Field is unforgettable as Norma Ray, the Southern mill worker who revolutionizes a small town and discovers a power in herself she never knew she had. Under the guidance of a New York unionizer, Ron Liebman, played by Ron Liebman, and with increasing courage and determination, Norma Ray organizes her fellow factory workers to fight for better conditions and wages. Based on a true story, Norma Ray is the mesmerizing tale of a modern-day hero. All of the actors do a great job. Beau Bridges is also one of the co-stars, the brother of Jeff Bridges, the dude. And he plays Norma's co-worker turned love interest. And there's just so much to love about the movie Norma Ray. I love that it's set in the South. And so much of like a union campaign is addressed in the movie, right? The early parts of the campaign, the initial meetings, the organizer coming in and kind of finding those natural leaders in the workplace. And race, particularly with it being in the South, race is a factor here. And you see that explored in the film in the ways in which racism and union busting are often hand in hand. And so I really can't recommend it enough. To me, it's just an all-time classic labor movie. And if you've never seen Norma Ray, it is worth looking up. Last I recall, it was available on some of the free streaming apps. So, if you got a Roku or something like that, just search for Norma Ray, see if you can find it. It's a little bit older film, but it's really a great one. It's timeless. It still hits hard. I really loved it. I love that you had a strong woman as the leader, and at the very end, if you're not moved by it, I just don't know what will move you. So Norma Rae, highly recommend. That's my April labor film of the month. Jacob, have you seen Norma Rae?
I have not.
Oh my God, you haven't seen Norma Rae. See, that's why I had to make it the film of the month this month, so that all of you know about how great Norma Rae is. So check that movie out. And for my song of the month, the April labor song of the month, I'm going to go with an all-time classic called Union Made. And that's Union Made, M-A-I-D. And it's been done by legends like Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger. Personally, I'm a big fan of the contemporary spin on the song by Old Crow Medicine Show. Not necessarily, I like Old Crow Medicine Show. They're not, my favorite band or anything like that, but they have done a really great version of it. So if you're interested, check that out. I would love to play it for you, but I don't want our video taken down by YouTube. So Union Made is a Union song with lyrics written by Woody Guthrie in response to a request for a Union song from a female point of view. Along with Talking Union, this song was one of the many pro-Union songs written by Guthrie during his time as a member of the Almanac Singers. And of course, Pete Seeger was another member of the Almanac Singers, and he wrote about Union Made. Quote, I'm proud to say I was present when Union Made was written in June 1940 in the plain little office of the Oklahoma City Communist Party. Bob Wood, local organizer, had asked Woody Guthrie and me to sing there the night before for a small group of striking oil workers. Early next morning, Woody got to the typewriter and hammered out the first two verses of Union Made, set to a European tune that Robert Schumann arranged for piano, called The Merry Farmer, back in the early 1800s. Of course, it's the chorus that really makes it. Its tune, Red Wing, was copyrighted early in the 1900s. So some of the lyrics talks about a Union maid who was never afraid. She's not afraid of the company goons or the deputy sheriffs. When there's a meeting at the Union Hall, she shows up and she stands her ground. The chorus, of course, is You Can't Scare Me, I'm Sticking to the Union. I love that one. And, also in the lyrics, the Union maid was wise to the tricks of company spies. She couldn't be fooled by a company stool. She'd always organized the guys. She always got her way when she struck for better pay. She'd show her card to the National Guard, and this is what she'd say. You can't scare me, I'm sticking to the Union. So, and of course it closes by saying, get you a man who's a Union man and join the ladies' auxiliary. Married life ain't hard when you got a Union card. Union man is a happy life. A Union man has a happy life when he's got a Union wife. So I'll dedicate this one to my Union wife, Miss Maggie, and shout out to your Union fiance, Ryan. So we've got some great Union maids in our movement. It's a great song. Love the song. Check out the original Woody and Pete version. Also check out the Old Crow Medicine Show version. So those are my April song and film picks of the month. Union Made and Norma Rae. Check them out.
That's going to be it for us, right, Adam?
Well, actually, I do have...
yeah.
Do we have anything else? Let's see. Wanted to go back here. Let me double check our ending plugs just to make sure there's nothing else we need to shout out. Worth noting that Labor Notes, of course, has more training on the way, as they always do. I always want to lift up our friends at Labor Notes for the good work they're doing. So if you're looking to get more involved, check that out. In May, they do have the 3-part Secrets of a Successful Organizer series, as well as their workshop on what to do when your union breaks your heart. And I just came across they will have another stewards training sometime later in May. I can't remember exactly which one this one is. I think assertive grievance handling was in April, so we'll stay tuned to the May edition of the Stewards Workshop. And also, don't forget our new weekly series called Shop Talk, which is on Thursday mornings. Shop Talk is dedicated to labor education, history, and training. You can check out the live stream on Thursday mornings on Facebook or YouTube, or of course, check out the podcast a couple days later. This week I did a session on learning the legislature. So we talked a little bit about some bad bills and some good bills today in the Alabama legislature. And this past week's Shop Talk was all about understanding the legislative process. And I had on Tara Bailey from the Alabama channel, and she did a great demonstration of the Alabama channel and what that is and how you can follow your legislators. So especially those of you who are in Alabama, I really recommend you check that out. It could be a useful resource, especially if you are a committee chair, if you are the political coordinator or some kind of role like that in your union, if you're a steward, whatever the situation may be. It may be worth sharing with some of your members to better understand the legislative process. And got some great stuff planned for Shop Talk this month, including a special Labor Notes featured episode, which we will begin starting next month. We'll have a featured episode from Labor Notes. Already recorded our main interview for that one. It was a really good interview. So y'all stay tuned to the exciting stuff we have for Shop Talk.
All right. With that, we'll go ahead and head out. Appreciate everybody's time. And Adam, we'll see you on Thursday morning. I'll see you next week.
Bye, y'all.